welcome everybody to the Carson City Open Space Advisory Committee meeting. It's April 15th, 2019. We will start with roll call and determination of a quorum. Tamara? Here.
Chairperson Scott.
Here.
Vice Chair Welch. Member Evans. Member Hall. Here. Member Emberson. Here. Member Masad. Here. Member Michael. Member Filson. A quorum's present.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I would like to open now to any public comment people might have on items that are not part of our agenda. You're welcome to come forward, and if you have anything to say to address the committee, we'd be happy to have you do so. Are there any public comments at this time? We will have public comments on each agenda item, but please feel free to come forward, introduce yourself if you would, and thank you for coming.
Nicole Woodson for the record. I'm just coming out here for the Carson City Prison Hill open space area. And I would like to see if for homeowners out there and the road's not being maintained, Carson City paved the road out there on Golden Eagle, and now they've abandoned maintaining it, and there's washouts from the Prison Hill recreation area that is washed out the road, and I'm just kind of hoping that we can get the city back on board to maintaining the road that accesses our property. Do you have anything to say? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We are doing some planning on the Prison Hill motorized recreation area, and of course you have to go by there to get to where your properties are. So we appreciate your comments, and we'll make sure we keep those, reflect those, I guess, if you will, in our discussions with the Public Works folks and RTC. So thank you very much. Any other public comment? Okay, we have minutes of February 25th, our last meeting. Do we have any changes, corrections, comments on the minutes? All right. Do we have a motion with regard to the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from February 25th, 2019.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Next item, we have a presentation from the Friends of Silver Saddle. Ann, are you going to introduce our Silver Saddle contingent, if you will?
I can do that, Mr. Chair. Joining us this evening is Nancy Santos. She is president of the Friends of Silver Saddle Ranch. And once a year, usually at the beginning of the year, we do like to invite the friends to come and share their annual activities with the Open Space Advisory Committee and just keep in communication. And I'll turn it over to Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy, for coming. Nice to see you, and please feel free to take the floor and give your presentation.
All right, thank you for having me. Seems like I was just here. Is your green light on? Green light? No. Oh, there, okay. I saw the red and I thought that was it. Didn't it used to be red? Okay. Anyway, so yeah, like I said, it seems like I was just here doing this. So you may remember some of the slides. Oh yeah, you have to do the. So just some pictures. I don't know, I mean, most of you are familiar with the ranch, I think, have been out there. So I bet I did include some pictures just for those that maybe haven't been out there. These are springtime pictures, which it should be looking like this pretty soon. I think they'll put the water on this month, so it'll start greening up real nice, the fields. And this is just a map. So the red is where the lower one is where the red house is. And then there's some trails on there too. If you go to the west up the canyon, this is what they call Dead Truck Canyon, the trail that goes up there. And that's why. It's got sagebrush growing in the bed. So, and then once you get up to the top, you get a nice overview. That was obviously fall. And then up the top are the spires up there. And then we walked all the way up to the top. That other inset's just a Nevada rock that we found along the way. And then the views you can get from up there. Especially this year, this was probably taken more in January or something. It's not from this year, but we have still a lot of snow up there, so the view is still great. And same people actually are on the board. I threw in some pictures just to make it different. Myself as the president, Mike Drews, he's our vice president. He's an archaeologist, GIS specialist, and he's working on some things that you know about. I'll talk about those later. Secretary Michael Bish, Treasurer Kathy Sylvia, who's here in the back. Wave your hand. Most of you know her. Trustee Craig Swope, he's our advertising specialist. Whoops, I see I messed up. John Aragon, he's the management analyst, and he's been helping out for a couple years now, too. Craig's an old guy. He's been around on the board for quite a bit. And two new trustees that I'm yet to get their pictures, Tom Donaldson and David Deneen, even though they've been here for over a year, they've been on the board, but I still don't have their pictures yet. We'll get them one of these days. I keep bugging them. And then just our mission statement, presentation of, preservation of Silver Saddle Ranch and its cultural, historical, and natural resources, both as public open space and the working ranch. So those are our main goals for the ranch. Oh, it pinched. Oh, well. Anyway, some of the things that we do, bird conservation, education programs, events. We've had several social events. I'll get to those a little bit. And we have events, recreation, and then the city's been doing their own events too. We're in competition. We'll have to get busy. And then the Nevada Day Parade, social media, and ranch maintenance are the main things that we do, besides watching the historic and natural resources. And bird conservation, there are bird boxes you might see when you're wandering around out there. There will be more this year. Randy Paul, who used to be a board member, had to step down, but he's now building bird boxes, bluebird boxes to be specific, and gonna put up a few more. And then the wood duck boxes, which is on the two big ones in the back, on the sides, right and left. We've had those for quite a while, and he's gonna do some maintenance for me because they need a little help on those. And then the education programs we've been doing are the bird walks. People enjoy those. This year, we had a little different one. One of the seniors at the Carson High School came to be and wanted me to mentor her in leading bird walks. She'd been coming on mine for years since she was like 6 or 8, and now she's a senior in high school. And so I did that, and she led a field trip just this past month, March, out at Silver Saddle for her high school, one of her trips for the high school project. So that was really nice to help her. No, that one doesn't have a picture. I couldn't find the picture. It's like I ran out of time. And then the spring open house again this year. We did that last year for the first time. And the Kids in Park Day will be there. Well, that's the first time. We've been doing the spring open house for, I forget how many years now. But it's really popular and people like to come out, and it's a chance for them to look inside and talk to people, talk to the board members and stuff. So it's always nice. And April's a good time of the year for that. And then I always do a bird walk on that day too. This year I won't be here for that open house, but somebody else is going to lead the walk. And then we do the holiday open house. We did that again this year. We've been doing that for quite a few years too. It was a pretty nice day, not too bad. We had a lot of visitors come out just to say hi, and then this year we had the mule team giving rides, I should say. I think there's a couple pictures in here, maybe the next one. Yeah, one of our new board members, David, has he has 3 mules and a fjord horse, and he uses the 2 of the mules in the fjord to pull the wagon. That's the wagon we used last year. Since then, we've gotten a 12-person wagon, and so we can give a lot more people rides at the same time. Now, that would only hold like 2 or 3. This one holds 12, besides the driver and whoever's sitting next to him. So come out for a ride, because the wagon will be there on the open house day, which is May 18th. We did also participate in the Nevada Day Parade this year. This is an old picture. But same type of thing, although this year we had the mules and the horse pulling the wagon, and people riding in the wagon, and some people walking along too. So that was really fun, and I hope we get back to doing that again more. We do maintenance out there when we can, or what needs it. This was the bridge replacement across the ditch, not the one at the Red House, it's farther down, it's an old picture. It's just some of the things that we do. And of course, we've got the permittee running cattle out there. The cattle are mostly gone, because it's time to put the water in and water the fields, which is a really nice time of the year, because we can get sandhill cranes and other wading birds out in the fields. So if you see a really big bird out there, you'll know what it is. Tall. Some of the things that we do during the year, Board of Supervisors meeting if needed. We've been helping, or had been helping last year with the Eagle Valley Trails Committee. We have our monthly board meetings, everybody's favorite thing to do. They're all there early on, waiting for someone to open the door. We come here when it's necessary, not always, but I try. And then last year, I think it was, we went to the Parks and Rec Commission meeting, and then Mike Drews is working with the State Historic Preservation Office for the stewardship program. And I guess Juan and him have both attended the training this year. So that's just an old one too, with the land transfer back in 2016, when we had Senator Reed out here promote, to encourage him to vote for the lands bill. And just some more pictures down by the river. That was also, I think most of them were fall or winter. There's some young cottonwoods popping up in the middle of the field there. And then we've got some wood duck boxes down on this section. And we've had the western screech owls nesting in those boxes, which is nice. There's a gentleman that birds quite frequently out there and takes lots of pictures. And if you're on our Facebook page, I always post his stuff on there, and he gets really nice photos. There's some more. I don't have a nice sunny picture to end with, or sunset picture to end with, but sorry. But that's pretty much, what we've been doing. You have any questions, or?
Thank you, Nancy. Any questions from the committee? Yes.
Is there anything, Nancy, that you need from the committee to help you do the work that you do out there?
Well, we could do probably more if we had, 4 or 5 other people.
Okay.
But I'll keep that in mind.
Well, let us know
I'd like
if
to give you
how
guys a
we can
ride on the
help.
wagon someday. Probably can't do it all at once because of the legalities or whatever, but, let me know if you ever want to do that. And
Can we have a quorum on the wagon?
I'm sure staff can make that work.
yeah, and we'll talk amongst yourselves and see if there's a time this spring or summer that you're interested in doing that, and we'll take you down to the dam and back. So, okay?
I'm curious about the acquisition of the wagon. Can you tell the story behind it?
David was just kind of watching out for a wagon, and this one came up that was reasonably priced. I forget exactly what it was. I think it was maybe $3,000, and it's like new. I mean, I can't believe that we got it, really, that it holds that many people, and it's in really good condition. It's metal with some wood sidings, and it's got, cushion benches and backs. And David couldn't, he wanted to put up some, but his wife said no. And what happened was we paid for half, our Silver Saddle folks, and then Mike Drews put in for half. So that's how we managed that one.
That's pretty terrific. I couldn't help but notice during the Nevada Day Parade, the position that you guys assigned Mike. Is that like if you don't show up to the board meeting or you're the last one in so many times in a row, you get that position?
No, I mean, really, he should have been up in the front with David. But he was more than willing to do that.
We should be sure and overcome Nancy's short, putting Mike off like that and let him know how much we appreciate him
I'll
participating.
definitely tell him.
Other comments from the committee or any public comments, questions? Yes. I'm sorry, could you come forward and identify yourself so we can get you on the record? Thank you.
Nicole Woodson for the record, just checking to see if that's Juan Guzman that you had in your titles?
Yes.
The old open space coordinator?
Yep,
Great.
that was him.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Juan's continued to be active in open space trail and other activities, both here and in Douglas County.
Yeah, he's very busy.
Any staff comments or questions? Okay, this is a presentation and discussion. Did you have anything else to add, Nancy?
No, we just appreciate your support, and what I did forget to mention too was that the Parks and Rec Department is going to be helping with or having an event out at the ranch on the holiday open house. I think I want to say December, the first or second Saturday, I don't remember now. It's not on the top of my head, but they're going to do the events out there and have tables and stuff. But their events will be in the evening, so they'll have lots of lights up. So it should be quite spectacular to view after dark. So there'll be 2 or 3 evenings where it'll be open in the evenings for people to come out.
Great. And we'll have that on our calendar, right, Ann?
Yes, you will, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions? Nancy, thank you very much. We appreciate everything Foster does and all the work you guys have done and the fact that you're committed to and helping take care of a pretty important asset, and the pictures really reflect that, so.
I'm glad to help, and it's a whole group of us to get out there and do it, and everybody's, a lot of us work full-time too, but, so more retired folks would be nice. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving forward to item 3B, and before I forget again, and it would really be helpful for me, those of us who are older on the committee, if you would put the agenda item number on the staff report, so it says 3A or 3B, so we can correlate, some of us can correlate that. It's just a little thing, but it would be helpful if you would. Okay, item 3B, discussion only, update regarding the process towards creation of a conceptual plan and potential management strategies for the west side of the Prison Hill Recreation Area. Ann.
Thank you. In the last meeting of the Open Space Advisory Committee during the budget presentation, this was an item that was only discussed briefly, and that was also the time it was introduced. And we didn't put a budget, but it was just a matter of the overall work plan for the next year. And so this item was per request from Member Masad regarding concerns about the west side of Prison Hill. We manage the greater Prison Hill Recreation Area, 2,500 acres, and we have multiple projects all occurring in that area right now. We have the trailhead construction that will begin next month at the north end, which will include the first toilet. It will be a vault toilet and a small covered picnic shelter and some trail improvements. On the east side, with our SNPLMA grant, we are starting the trail alignment study. And on the south end, we have 2 grants to help us manage the motorized area. So this project in front of you right now discusses the east side, not to be forgotten, or the west side, excuse me. And so also in your packet is a map of the subject area. The subject area includes 100 acres located on the west side of the fence line. And that's important to know because when this land transferred to the city, that fence line was the boundary marker, if you will, for everything to the east was open space and covered with a conservation easement. Everything to the west came to parks and public purpose without a conservation easement. And so while it came under a different distinction, there are still restrictions that are identified in the Recreation and Public Purpose Act of June 14th, 1926. So some development can occur, but there are restrictions that it would be limited to public uses. And so we've not talked really in much detail yet on what a planning effort would be. And so just starting to brainstorm a little bit and bringing Vern Cron, our senior park planner, into the picture because he would lead this effort for us. We have talked about we need to review the city's master plans, what has been done to this point, review the potential management strategies for the area, and most likely, as a starting point, include a survey at the beginning. And we can, as part of that survey, reach out directly to the neighbors with a letter, since they are most directly impacted, and direct them to the city's survey resource. And we can also use our other social media accounts and the newspaper to reach out to the other residents throughout Carson City to have input, because as you may or may not know, it is a popular area for people to come throughout the city, not just the residents. And so the specific interest for Carson, for open space, is this is the trailhead for our open space areas. So we do have an interest as well on seeing how this area is managed. Are there any comments, questions,
Yeah,
directions?
and just to clarify, and we don't have a visual aid except what you have in the packet here, but the westerly boundary of our Prison Hill property that's held under the conservation easement that we have is butts up against the trailhead where we are now.
That is correct.
And then you mentioned the 100 acres, and that's Recreation and Public Purposes Act land that includes the water tank, our trailhead, and lands to the north and south. And then there's another small piece that's rectangular that, basically it looks like it goes from Sinbad to Valley View and from Kuntz Lane to the edge of our 100 acres. That's a BLM, that remains BLM, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. We've, that's a highly used area. It's been the subject of a lot of discussion. And I'm glad to try to see if we can get something moving forward with some public input. I really think if open space doesn't take the lead, it won't happen. And so I think it's important that we try to bring it into focus. But with that, I would open up to the committee for any questions or comments or, yes, Donna.
Since this falls under public use, what's the term now again?
The wording that it was transferred to Carson City is parks and public purpose.
So, and since next month we have a joint meeting with Parks, I would say that we should do this jointly with Parks, work on this with Parks, and do a joint survey. It seems to me this is something that this is one of those things that we have that joint meeting for, to discuss this, something like this, and work with them jointly on a plan for this, something like this. I agree, we need to do a survey first and see what the community wants, but I agree also, since our parking is, for our trailhead is on this property, it's very important that we have a say in what's going to happen here. And the parking up there and the road to that parking is really bad. And it gets I don't know what it's like right now after all the rains and everything. I haven't been up there in the last couple of months, and it may be really bad getting to the parking lot. And it could use some real improvement, that parking area. But I would say this is something that definitely should be on the agenda for next month's meeting, joint meeting.
Thank you, Donna. Other comments from the committee? Yes.
I agree with Donna, but I suspect that open space may be the ones with an appetite to do something. I'm not sure what Parks and Recreation might have as far as budget or higher priorities. So after we talk with them, it may turn out that open space are the ones who want to take the lead on this and make this happen. It's definitely, it draws down the excitement of coming to our open space property, going through this area. So I'm not saying my words quite the way I want to, but I hope you get the picture. I want it to be I would like for it to be more welcoming and an invitation to come into open space rather than something that's, you really have to, you go at your own risk as it is right now. So those are my comments on it.
Thank you. Yeah, to me, this area represents the do-nothing alternative and just let it deteriorate. And you can make an argument that Parks and Rec should be more involved, and I certainly would agree with their, the invitation to them to join us. But frankly, I would like to see this committee make an effort on behalf of the city. There's more than open space here, but I feel this is a bit of a shameful situation. And I think this committee has some interest, and I think it's going to be a process, but I would really like to see us take the lead and see if we can't make something better out there. And I think a good place to start is to get the community as a whole and the community out there focused on this and get their input and begin to develop some sort of an idea what folks out there would like, what they feel is appropriate, and try to begin to pull the other pieces of the city into the process if we can develop a plan of some kind or begin to develop a framework. That's just my personal feeling, but I hate to see this is, in people's minds, this is open space. And it's not something to be very proud of at this point, in my mind. Any other comments, Jeremy?
I'm curious to know what kinds of funding options we might have available to help with some of this with the road improvements. If you follow Kuntz Lane all the way up, I mean, it goes to the water tower. Is this Public Works? So is that part of a Public Works budget item? Is something like a road improvement to the water tank?
It's my understanding, at least this section of road is not a designated street as far as the city is concerned, so falling under the jurisdiction of RTC, the Regional Transportation Commission. And therefore, most likely, they would not allocate dollars here since it is not a city street.
So then how, if this road needs to be improved, and from my experience, and I haven't been out here in a while, the road up Kuntz, the very wide one, it's got, ditches it's got drainage ditches on both sides, it's got water bars all the way across. The main big wide road is actually pretty good until you head northeast, and that's the section that's kind of gnarly. So how are those improvements made in the first place? The drainage ditches and the water bars?
I got something. I was at a meeting with Ann and the parks guy, and his idea is to block all the traffic from going up into that area. That was his idea. His idea was actually to maintain the three roads here and to try and divert traffic so that there's only 4 places to access this land. meaning off of Clearview Drive, off of Valley View, off of Sinbad, I guess this is, and off of Coons. And to block all traffic up in this area at all. And one of the things he said that stuck with me was, why do people who want to go hiking have to park so close to the trailheads? If their idea is to go hiking, then let them hike. So, I don't know if that's, where we want to go with this, but I think blocking the roads is not a bad idea, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. So to give you a little context, the existing improvements that are on Kuntz Lane were consistent with direction from the BLM and in cooperation with the Public Works Department, only with the sole intention of just providing limited access to their water tank. It wasn't designed for public access. Currently, there's a water line easement that goes up Kuntz Lane. It doesn't provide for public access. Even though you're traveling through BLM public lands, there isn't an expressed access easement for public use. After we go through the public process, and if we determine that we still want to have that as a main access, we can go and amend the water line easement to have additional public access for that. But we want to go through a public process and make sure going through the hoops with BLM is really what the public wants, and then that's the thoughtful location that you guys want to see. But then if there is a public access easement, also we have the land spill in play. So we have those 6 parcels that if the land spill goes through and if those lands are disposed of, and let's say they are developed with the current zoning, those owners will have to, Kuntz would become a public road in that sense, and they will have to build that out, which includes not only paving the road, but addressing the stormwater and drainage and all of those things that go with it. So there's a lot of long-term things that could happen, but we do need to determine what the best access points are first, and then make sure we have the appropriate public access easements in those locations where appropriate.
So it seems like in the broad sense of getting some public feedback on what our options are to move forward, to me, it seems worthwhile to facilitate that and actually come up with some ideas to present to the public. Sounds like Jerry's conversation would be an option where the trailhead would actually start at the at the other road, basically where the west boundary, so that the trailhead would move down to the west. And I'm not sure the main easement road would be gated.
Right.
And the public would have, we would go through a series of revegetating some of the trails and establishing the actual trails. That seems like it's one option. Another option would be to work through the steps necessary to improve the road, keep the existing trailhead, but provide some improvements that speak to this idea of making it a little bit more attractive. I don't know, at this point, it seems like there's 2 options. Any others?
That's where the public comes in, I think. Any other, Jerry?
Yeah, I think what precipitated this in my mind is I walk out there every day, and the amount of erosion that's occurred in the last 3 years is far beyond anything that occurred in 50 years before that. I mean, people are up there terrorizing those roads and those pathways with motorized vehicles and ATVs and motorcycles, even though it's not zoned for that, and there's no protection for the land. And what I'm seeing is washout after a rainstorm, and it's just going to continue to get worse. And so that's part of I said, well, if the city can't or won't do anything about this land because they don't really know what to do, I think we can decide what to do with it and can try and do something to protect it. At least protect the roads and the pathways the way they are and stop this erosion stuff from hitting the rest of the city. I mean, it just seems like it's the right thing to do, and that's what got me involved. So that's why I'm sitting on this board. So here we are.
Well, we appreciate your involvement, Jerry. It is a need, I think, and something where open space could be helpful. Donna?
Yeah, it sounds like what I'm hearing though is something does have to be done, but I also am it sounds like we're gonna get into a real big problem with the motorized issue, and that sounds like a lot of fencing, is what I'm hearing. And monitoring and,
Well, you're right, and it could turn into that, but what I'm noticing lately is that there is less volume than there has been. Not to say there isn't any, but there's less. The problem is that it's always been illegal to do that, and that it is impossible to enforce, because by the time you get a sheriff up there, he'd rather be, writing somebody up for jaywalking. I mean, and by the time he gets up there, there's 24 ways the guy can escape that's up there racing. So all goes back tied into the signage issue, which was part of the thing that I said from the very beginning. If nothing else, let's get some signage up there. Well, we can't put signs on Parks and Rec land. The Parks and Rec has to, and they haven't expressed any interest in doing that. So it all started, that's what my misconception was, is that this was all open space to begin with. But then I was corrected by Jennifer saying, no, that belongs to us, but we don't really want it. So then I said, well, if they don't really want it, why don't we do something with it? And then we can provide the signage and the education tools necessary so people understand what they can and can't do there. And that's what all tied into the websites and all the areas that we were talking about since for the last 2 years or year and a half. We've been working on all that stuff, and this would all bring it together as one final thing. I mean, that's kind of what my thought was, is to try and protect this land on all open space land, but you got to do it through education. Well, this is a start, because there's too many egress points and no information. The only information there is at the very top of the trailheads, and there's 2 signs that say pretty much what I'm saying to you, except that it's up there, and all the damage is occurring below that. It used to be that there were people riding motorcycles and all kinds of cars and stuff on the other side of that fence line, but I haven't seen anything like that in the last 2 years anyways. Or maybe I just haven't noticed it, but I haven't seen any evidence of it either, because I walk up there and you can see the tracks. So anyways, that's kind of what conservation, protection.
Do we have any public comment? Yes, Robin.
Is it on? Robin Orloff. I have a lot of questions about this. I'm still confused. Maybe you can help clarify. So the land we're talking about that is west of the fencing is open space land, or it's Parks and Rec land? So it's Parks and Rec?
West of the fence line,
By the
the
water
wording as
tower?
it came to us with the lands bill is parks and public purpose.
Parks and Public Purpose. So is that lands bill of 1926?
That is the Omnibus Public Land Management Act of 2009.
So,
The
but what
recent-
was
the
the Act
recent
of
one.
26 that we're talking about that says this is public purpose?
So the land, as it transferred to Carson City, came under the OPLMA of 2009. And in OPLMA, it said, when these lands transfer, the uses of these lands are restricted as identified in the Recreation and Public Purpose Act of 1926.
26, okay, but it's Parks and Rec's land. And motorized vehicles aren't allowed on this property, correct?
I wouldn't say that they aren't allowed. What I would say is it's confusing on which kind of vehicles are allowed, because obviously the public works guys are going up to the water tank, and I have seen people that drive very slowly up there with their dogs trailing because either they're too feeble or too lazy to walk their dogs. Either way, it's okay, because they're not racing around and harming the trails or other pedestrians, which can be seriously something that should be considered when people are up there racing their motorbikes up there.
Right.
So some is, some aren't, but then somebody put up a sign, and I don't know if it was Ann or Parks and Rec, on the end of Valley View, and it has a little thing with a slash, and it says, no motorcycles or ATVs. So again, I'm confused as,
Right.
I'm part of the public that's confused about what you
I
can
think
and
we're all
can't do there.
confused. And I think it's sad, because I look at this land, I see it as a gateway to Prison Hill, to the main bulk of Prison Hill, right in the center of Prison Hill. And I look over at Ash Canyon, and I see the land, the entrance to Ash Canyon, open space land that comes out of Ormsby. And there's a dirt road now that goes up to that water tower and the reservoir, and there are kiosks up there, and I'm thinking how that's been all cleaned up and it looks lovely. Why can't we do that on the east side of town? And we're working on the Kings Canyon, the entrance to Kings Canyon. Why, I just feel like the east side is being sacrificed. We're the Great Basin, we're beautiful, we have a lot to be proud of. There's only 2 of us. We can't do everything. I know we can't, but I think in the conceptual, we're talking about what's going to happen with this land. Let's have some respect for the Great Basin. The west side of town is beautiful. I love it. It's a gateway to the forest and Tahoe and all that. But I think that our side of town deserves the same kind of consideration, however we need to do that. And I think it can be lovely. And over at Ash Canyon, I don't know if it's private land around that dirt road that goes up to the reservoir, but that's fenced on both sides of that land. So people can't go off and ride through that land. Maybe because it's private. But I also have concerns about, and a question about the BLM that is in front of the land we're talking about, that BLM land that at the meeting in October, I believe what transpired was that BLM land is going to be, what's the word, a reversionary whatever that's before Congress, that Congressman Amadei signed, that BLM land that I think was open for just public use, is going to be transferred to Carson City. Is that correct? Is that what's happening with that land?
Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. First, Robin, I want to thank you. You're always very involved, and I appreciate your passion. And we do want to see what's great on the west side happening here on the east, and that's why we want to do a public process and involve the public on what are the solutions here. It's not just pointing out the problems, but how can we make this better? And that's the whole point of this. So we have the same goal that you do, but we do have very limited staff. But regardless, we're committed to moving forward, working through conservation issues. It doesn't matter if it's the parks or open space, we're all one department, and we're working on this together, which is why we're dedicating the park planner's time to lead up this project. We'll work with our trails coordinator, we'll work with Ann, we'll work with her whole team and everybody, including Public Works, to try to come up with a solution, but the public has to be part of that. So that's the point of this whole board item. With regard to the 6 parcels that are BLM, the Carson City Lands Bill has not gone through Congress yet. It's still at legislative drafting. We've drafted the legislation, we've sent it to Congressman Amadei's office. I actually met with him this morning about that and the status of that bill. And it is moving forward, but it's not approved. So it does need to get through Congress before it's approved. Right now, those 6 parcels are owned by the Bureau of Land Management. And you could say they're managed by BLM, but it's really a lack of management in that area. So they're not actively managing those 6 parcels. Should it go through to Congress, BLM will still own those parcels, but they will end up disposing of those parcels because they will be on an island on its own. They don't like to have checkerboard patterns or in-holdings. So if they do dispose of it, and let's assume that they're developed with existing zoning in place, there would be homes similar around the surrounding area, and they would have to make improvements to Coons Lane and everything around there. But that's a long way off. But that's where it stands right now. But they are not owned by Carson City. They've never been owned by Carson City or leased by Carson City. They are BLM's land, those 6 parcels. And we have to see where Congress goes with the lands bill.
But as they're owned now, under BLM, building isn't allowed. There would have to be some kind of congressional ruling that disposal and development would be allowed, correct?
Correct.
And I guess my feeling, just looking at that whole piece of land, is as a resident there, I'd like all of that land to be owned by Carson City Open Space, part of Prison Hill, and be the gateway to Prison Hill. And I would like the neighbors to be consulted, like you're talking about consulting on the land beyond that we're talking about now. I don't really feel as a neighbor that I was as aware as I could have been of that other issue with the BLM land. So I'm hoping that this time the public will be informed by letter, I think you said, or however that would happen. And I just have issue with even that BLM being disposed of. I just think it should all be Great Basin open space, and we should try to manage it like you've beautifully managed by the river, the east side of the river, cooperatively with the BLM. What you've done over there is magnificent, and the development right at Silver Sage, the parking lot, and what's been done there. I think we have the capability if we have the desire, so.
Thank you,
for your
Robin.
time.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, any more comments from the committee? Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy.
Thank you. I'm not going to say it again. I live on that side of town, and I have used the Prison Hill access to get up there and hike those trails several times. Used to do it quite a bit, not so much anymore. But so my understanding is these 6 parcels that are below Prison Hill there on the east side or west side, those are all BLM. That's where they were going to build the firehouse and all that stuff from before. So I guess I'm not familiar with the bill that's out there, and they were just, if they're going to dispose of those, are they transferring them to Carson City, or what are their plans?
Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. So just to be clear, those 6 parcels that are owned by BLM, if the federal lands bill goes through, they would remain BLM and then eventually be sold.
Okay.
They would
So
not-
sold
they
for
would
like
not-
the highest bidder kind of thing?
Yep, they would go through their public auction process.
Oh, so there's not a chance of the city getting them then?
The Board of Supervisors directed this action, so it's already been through a public process, and based on, the ability to be able to manage this area, it actually, in my opinion, would be very helpful if we had some disposal of those properties, and then we can focus on those other areas.
Well, I kind of see it as an entrance to the whole Prison Hill area too. So it sounds like then they could develop all of these parcels, or at least some of them. So that if they all did get developed residential or whatever, that blocks entrance into the Prison Hill. And that's a problem on the west side. I mean, it won't block it, but it just channels it, I guess. There will still have to be access at some place. But it
They
makes
would
it-
have to build out Kuntz, and they would have to build out those other roads, and those would become city roads, but they would have to build those out at the developer's expense.
Right.
I mean, someone could purchase all these parcels and do nothing with them.
That's
Or
true.
they could try to change the zoning or whatever, but based on the existing zoning, it's like.
Is it residential though, zoning? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's residential, 1 acre parcels,
1 acre parcels.
single family dwellings.
Okay.
Now, I understand what you're trying to say, and I understand what Robin was saying about the visual thing, but we're talking about 2 blocks here. So if somebody was to develop this land and turn it into single family homes, then the streets that's going to the open space land or the public purpose land would be paved and maintained by the city, which would be a big farther than we are right now. So it would be a better situation than what we have right now.
So, so they have to have an access road
Sure.
somehow to get up to the water
Absolutely,
tank.
they do. And then there'll be arterials going, I mean, if you think about how they're gonna
Right.
put 1 acre parcels there, you're gonna need to have access to them, driveways,
North and south roads and all
And it
that.
wouldn't be high density, so, I mean, as an owner up there, I'm not objecting to this. I mean, it's kind of like Anderson Ranch, right? So you want to buy it, go ahead and buy it. It's going to be public, it's going to be for sale. And so,
Well, as long as it doesn't impact people's access to the hill,
It should
then
improve it,
that's-
actually.
Then that wouldn't be a big deal. I
yeah, no, it
think.
should improve it. That's kind of the forward thinking part of this thing, that if that does happen, and whenever it does happen, then the street then will be maintained by the city, which it is not now, or I don't even know why they paved it. Who paved it? It's BLM? I don't even know.
I didn't even know it was paved.
It's paved for 1 block.
Oh. Anyway, just my thoughts on that. As long as there's still access to Prison Hill, at least at that main spot, it's kind of one of the I think it's one of the main ones. I don't know too much about all the other little side streets.
Well, for one thing, also, that's the public easement for the water tank.
Right, right.
So that, I mean, I don't see how they can't have access to that. I have no idea about that. You would know that.
Yes, I mean, sometimes those areas get fenced off, but they won't for this area, I would imagine, yeah. Okay,
Thank you. And I would also point out that that's the road to the trailhead that we have now, so. But those are the kinds of things, I think, that would be part of the public discussion as we look at this. And, we're trying to balance a whole bunch of things, finances being a big part of them, so. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Any final comments from the committee?
I would like to know, so are we moving forward with the idea of doing a public survey? We are. Okay. Was that, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. And I think I remembered Vern
Yes.
saying that the city would help with the printing costs and mailing costs of sending out questionnaires to the surrounding residents.
So we would send letters to notify the neighbors that there is a survey available online.
That's going to be they're not, so the survey will not be in print.
No, but alternatively, what we could offer is if people aren't as computer savvy, they could come into our office.
Well, if we're going to mail it to them anyways, why don't we just mail them?
Say the same thing. Yeah.
Because then it's more time on our end to process answers.
Well, you have to put together the survey anyways, right? Go ahead. I'm just asking questions here. I don't know the
Jennifer
answers.
Budge. So people could go online, they could print it out at home, and they could mail it in if they prefer to do that. If someone calls and says, I can't use a computer, we'll send them a survey, it's fine. But it's super easy to use. We just sent one out for Roscoe Park, and just to let you know, it's been out for like 48 hours and we already have 100 responses. It's
Awesome.
really
Hey, if it works,
easy.
I'm great. I think it's great.
It provides all kinds of charts. It's through SurveyMonkey. It's very user-friendly. So we haven't had problems with other surveys that we've done, similar to the one we did on the golf course and things like that. It's just really easy to use. So I think it'll be easy for people to use. But of course, if they don't have access or they can't provide it, they can give us a call and we'll mail them a survey.
And is it going to be citywide or?
The survey will be available citywide, but only the neighbors, adjacent neighbors, will receive a letter in the mail to say, please provide your comments.
For folks that don't have computers, perhaps in the letter, it could direct them to the library to fill it out.
Yeah, the other thing about the computer survey is that the tallying is basically automated. So the hand ones can be input for people that aren't able to do it on the computer, and then the bulk of them will be easily tallied, and hopefully we'll get good representation. Okay, any other final comments or questions? All right, this is a
Robin Orloff again. I appreciate the public input aspect of this. And just hypothetically, is this something that happens with most things that involve neighbors when the committee is considering changes or affecting our communities, i.e. when the lands bill, the reversionary thing was discussed and all the land changes discussed last fall? Did neighbors get letters at that time? Is that something where neighbors get letters when land is affected?
There were parcels all over the city, and I think the public process was very much through the normal events in terms of agendas and planning commission, board of supervisors, open space, of course.
There was notification in the paper and whatever print media that they had to, like Carson Now and stuff, they had notification about these lands being transferred back to BLM or whatever.
So this particular instance that we're discussing now is some special instance that the neighbors will be notified by mail?
This is about changing or deciding what to do with the 100 acres that are below the current open space land. This has nothing to do with that BLM stuff.
Okay. But there was, okay.
Robin, I just want to point, so for example, we're updating the Roscoe Park Master Plan, to just give you in context. We need to update we have no real plan for Prison Hill. We need to have a master plan, just like we do with every other park that we have. And I know this is not a park, it's sort of a special, unique area, but with Roscoe Park, we just sent a notice out to the adjacent neighbors. We sent out a survey online. We did a press release. We put it out on our social media. It's been in all Carson Now and Nevada Appeal. So we're going to do a similar process with this, just like that. So we want to involve the public. We want to be really proactive. We'll probably have a meeting or two on site. We want people to be active and engaged. There's not a requirement for this process to do any public noticing, but we are going to be doing that.
Thank you, Robin. Any other public comment? Okay, moving along to item 3C. This is a possible action item regarding an update to the budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 and approval for full funding of a full-time Trails Coordinator position. Ann?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a brief update, since the last time that we met, I'd like to start with the good news, and that good news was the fire suppression line item. Recently, the Nevada Division of Forestry reviewed their contracts statewide, and the good news is for Carson City, there is a significant decrease in the charges to Carson City. Previously, probably for about the last 5 years, the city was charged $150,000, which was then shared amongst 4 accounts throughout the city, one of which was ours, and we budgeted $37,500 each year. After NDF reviewed kind of the risk essentially to the city, they lowered that amount to $10,750. Again, still split between 4 divisions, so that is a significant savings to our budget. So that's the great news. Then other updates, there was a change in the discussion for the park ranger. Due to other priorities throughout the city, there is a desire, and maybe Jen would like to go into more detail, but instead of a park ranger, revisioning the position to help out with the rifle range a little more. So at least in the current discussions, that new position will not be funded at all from open space. So again, initially a savings in our budget that we will not contribute. And then the trails coordinator. Citywide, there were about $2.5 million in requests and only $1.1 million available for operations, and that included positions. And so several of the departments came to the meetings with options and opportunities. And so with the trails coordinator position, one of the discussion items was whether the Culture and Tourism Authority could help fund 25%. We initially had asked parks either through the quality of life account or general fund, but there was another side conversation. And again, Jen has had the initial discussions with the Culture and Tourism Authority. At this point, it's looking very optimistic, and that is the recommendation going forward. But that would need to be approved by the Carson City Board of Supervisors and maybe the CTA Board as well. And so the way this item is written for this committee is a Plan B. If the Culture and Tourism Authority does not and the Board of Supervisors does not approve alternative A of using 25% from the other source of funding, would this committee be willing to fund a full-time trails coordinator position? In your packet, I did provide the same information that I provided to the Internal Finance Committee of the successes and achievements of the trails coordinator. Definitely achieving great things for the city, probably more than 20 hours a week. And we definitely have a need for open space. The vision, when we brought this to the committee back in February, was that the position, if funded through other sources of funding, could be available citywide as a trails coordinator should be. So they can look at the development plans as they come into the city and look at those connections from neighborhoods to the parks to open space. And working across with other departments and agencies. So there's a grand vision, but and to some extent, if the position is only funded from open space, we still do contribute some to other divisions and departments. It would probably be more limited in scale, so I'm not saying that he wouldn't, but it would just be limited compared to the grander vision. Are there any questions?
Margie?
So if I recall, we had originally planned on paying 100% for the trails coordinator, is that correct?
Initially, 75%.
Okay. If someone else contributes money and it becomes more of a citywide position, will open space be able to get the work done that needs to be done?
75%.
Okay.
Okay, other comments or questions from the committee? Jerry?
Yeah, I have a question about that park ranger. So we approved hiring another park ranger because one was needed for open space, and now he's gone away to the rifle range? Is that what I'm gathering here?
There was a request in the budget to get a third park ranger, partially funded by open space. It was proposed to have 35% funding from open space with the remainder from other sources. We tried to be creative and make the general fund request as low as possible. We were going to offer up our money from our seasonal park ranger and funding from quality of life maintenance in the parks budget. And in the end, it was only a $20,000 request total with benefits for that third park ranger that would work throughout the whole park system, not just open space. He would work everywhere. He or she would work everywhere. But that did not get past the internal finance committee for funding. Since then, there has been a desire to get some additional staff at the rifle range. It probably won't be a park ranger, but that's where the staffing needs in the department have been identified potentially by the board. They're going to be voting this Thursday, April 18th is when they vote for the temporary budget. So that's when open spaces budget gets approved. That's when the Parks Department budget, Q18, general fund increases and allocations, and our capital improvement budget will be approved. So that's the tentative budget, and then they'll approve the final budget in May. But this Thursday is where the majority of the work happens and the questions and the support from the public typically occurs.
So we had, in our previous suggestions or recommendations, looked at 35% from open space, and that's now off the table, so to speak, because the balancing funding did not occur that was, staff was trying to put together to get to that additional park ranger, is that right?
Correct. Because what Ann mentioned earlier, there were, over $2 million in requests, and for the operations side of the general fund, and there's just not adequate funding to fund everybody. So while they're supportive of the 75% for the trails coordinator, the internal finance committee did not approve us moving forward with that third park ranger position.
Okay. I guess that's the way it goes, but we felt it was pretty important.
And that doesn't mean that the board couldn't approve something else at Thursday's meeting. But our process is we work with staff, we figure our department priorities, we meet with all of you, the Parks Commission, other advisory boards, get your feedback. Then we take everything to the internal finance committee and see sort of what makes the cut. And that's just sort of where we are in the process.
Donna?
Okay, I have a couple questions. So then, okay, we didn't get the park ranger. We still, one way or another, we're gonna get the trails coordinator. Either we're gonna get 100% or a 75% trails coordinator. One way or another, right?
So currently, we have a part-time, 20
Yeah.
hours a week. that is approved in our budget. The Open Space Advisory Committee has approved bumping this percentage up 25% up to 75. Currently, we're asking the Culture and Tourism Authority to come up with 25%. And both the Board of Supervisors and Culture and Tourism Authority both have to approve that. Is that correct?
So let me jump in about the CTA, so the Culture and Tourism Authority. Currently, the city receives 1% for administrative services to the CTA. So when we have special events outside of Epic Rides, that's a separate agreement. But if there's sports tournaments that come in town and they play at Centennial Park, they don't have to pay rental fees. In lieu of that, they're endorsed by this Culture and Tourism Authority. We stripe the fields, we maintain the fields, we support the services for that tourism event because they're staying in our rooms and they're generating room tax. So that's a very generalized version of what happens, but it's through a separate agreement that we receive the 1%, and it funds several administrative services throughout the city. It's human resources help, Parks and Rec help, Public Works, across the board, that administrative services contract. That existing contract expires June 30th. We have worked with the executive director of the Culture and Tourism Authority to add language out of that existing 1%. It's basically reallocating existing dollars, so it's not an increase to the CTA's bottom line for reallocating those services for support. And it would be to have that trail coordination support. So to assist the CTA in bringing in these large-scale trail events, making sure that we have regional trail connectivity so we can have those opportunities, coordinating with groups like Epic Rides, but making sure we have a maintenance plan and a construction plan for these trail systems, and implementing the Unified Pathways Master Plan and making sure that we have those trail connections that we all want to see and making that a priority. So that person would be responsible for making that happen, but coordinating with the CTA to make sure that we're working together to make those trail systems happen. So it'd be out of the existing 1% agreement. So that will go before the CTA board and the Board of Supervisors separate from the budget, which is going forward on Thursday.
Okay. Or we would fund 100% for a trails coordinator that would just do trails.
So that's what Ann's proposing is your plan B is should the CTA agreement not go through, could we support that additional 25%? So the trails coordinator would be 100% funded from open space.
Do we
Because
have-
if we go back to the general fund question, can general fund pick up that other portion? It's likely that it will be no because of the route we went with the park ranger.
Do we have that in our budget? Do we have that available?
We do, especially with the two items that we just saved on with the fire suppression and the park ranger.
And my last question is, we got all this extra money for fire suppression. Does that mean we get less fire support?
I would hope not.
Other questions or comments? Margie? I'm sorry.
Well, my comment is that my head is spinning from 25%, 37%, 1%. I'm trying to figure out how I do fractions. Sorry, I'm a scientist, but not that good at math.
Just my 2 cents on the trails coordinator position. I don't have any heartburn at all if we were to have to go with Plan B. I mean, it would be great if we were paying for 75%, yay for our budget. But, you know, I'm a firm believer of 20% of your employees do 80% of your work, and Greg is definitely in that realm. He's worth every cent, and we need to do whatever we can to keep him busy.
Thanks, Jeremy. Donna, another?
I just have one comment to make. The Eastern Sierra Trails Coalition, at our last meeting, which was actually last Tuesday, one of the things we came up with was focusing in the future on connectivity between urban and trails so that people would not necessarily need to get into a car to get to the trails. So I agree, it would be nice if we had Greg focusing on trails, but it would also be nice that if he was also, or our trails coordinator, may not always be Greg, we may wear him out someday, was also doing that connectivity between the urban and our trails.
I think it's really important that, I think the big vision is this to be the city's trails coordinator. So that would include planning, coordinating with developments that come in, working with our park planners and community development, and making sure we're getting easements where needed when developments come in, and we're getting that Unified Pathways Master Plan on the ground. Also coming up with a maintenance plan. We don't have a really good maintenance plan, managing the muscle power contract, making sure that we're supporting them and giving them that they're helping us where needed. We have good maintenance and trail priorities. Also, our paved trails, we don't have a pavement condition index like you do have on roads, and we need to have those on our trail systems. Looking at our concrete trails, we really need the holistic approach, whether it's planning, maintenance, or construction. We need this person to look at the whole thing and throughout the whole city. We can't just compartmentalize where the trail systems are. So we need to work with our neighbors, work with Douglas and Washoe counties, and make sure we're getting that trail connectivity. And on the regional perspective, that's really where the Culture and Tourism Authority come in, because we want these regional trail systems. You can ride to Tahoe, you can go to Douglas County, we want you to connect to Washoe. I mean, there's really some amazing opportunities here that are unique, and we want to market that. We don't want to love our trails to death, and we have to have a balance of that, but we want to bring people in to enjoy them, and that can help reinvest in that trail system by doing so.
I agree, and one of the things also muscle-powered, our strategic plan, we just worked on that, and one of the things we are looking at is focusing on some of the urban interface, especially on the east side and maybe some of the lower income neighborhoods, making sure that we're focusing on their needs. And also the historic Virginia and Truckee Rail Trail, I have to put a bid in on that, is the connectivity of that and making that available and connecting that to our less urban trails. So, yeah, I agree. I think actually working with the CTA may be the best option, but I would go with Plan B if we can't get Plan A.
Okay, we are talking about a budget item here. Is there any other public comment? Okay, staff has made some recommendations. Do we have a further discussion or motion from the committee?
I'd like to make a motion that we, if needed, pay for a full-time trails coordinator for Carson City if the funding through the CVA doesn't come through.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, on the discussion, does that satisfy the need for staff in terms of a potential action by the committee?
Ben Johnson, Deputy District Attorney for the record. If we could just amend the motion slightly to recommend the updated budget to the Board of Supervisors with, as you said, with the full-time funding for the Trails Coordinator position. So to include the part about the recommendation regarding the updated budget.
Okay. Is that acceptable to the mover of the motion?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Do I need to actually try to say it, or?
I think it's been
Okay,
said, and we're going to
okay.
move right ahead. Is there any public comment? All right, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, staff updates, discussion items. Ann, do you want to go through those since I don't see Lindsay?
Yes, I can certainly walk through those quickly. Cultural resources, we had a meeting about a week or two ago, staff and the city manager with the State Historic Preservation Office. They are supportive in moving things along faster than they have been, so that's the good news. OHV Working Group, this is with the National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council. We're kind of at a pause right now with their 2 new grants for the south end of Prison Hill. They are also required to acquire a state business license, and that's taken a little bit longer than they hope. But we hope to have them here on site in April, May at the latest to start the inventory and assessment. Events, Joanne Michael did reach out to me since the last meeting. I can't recall if she was here, but maybe she was here. But she did reach out to me. She asked for a copy of the conservation easement, the application to Silver Saddle Ranch. She's been kind of cross-checking both of those, and she has expressed an interest to really help us out with that. Nancy Santos has already left, and her and others from Silver Saddle Ranch would also like to be very involved with that. The conservation easement with Old Woods Ranch, that's also moving. With Member Welch, he and I met with 2 of the family members last Friday. They did submit their letter of intent to the Nevada Division of Forestry, that they do want to submit an application this coming fall. They reviewed the Horse Creek Ranch Conservation Easement, which was my homework to them, and asked, is this relevant to your family still? Because your family had a lot of input, and the good news it is. So we're still talking about those building envelopes, but it's looking more positive than it has in 15 years. So it's really going well.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is it including a trail?
That was on the table for discussion, and we are planning to bring this to the committee in August. And then we just talked about the conceptual plan for the west side of Prison Hill.
Okay. Any comments or questions of staff on the reports?
I have a question about the survey for Prison Hill. Okay, somebody's gonna develop it. What's the deadline for this? What's the time frame for this, you think?
Talking with Vern Cron this morning, he wanted to reach back out to you by the end of this week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments? We're certainly ready to call for public comments.
Robin, you got anything?
You're always welcome, Robin. I'm just going to give you a hard time.
Last one standing.
Okay. Next item, Director's Report. Non-substantive update regarding departmental projects, programs, and grants, legislative update, and Board of Supervisors action items.
Thank you,
Jen.
Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Park and Recreation Director. You have a copy of the Board of Supervisors action items in your packet. And I wanted to give you just a couple quick snapshots of the legislative session that we're working actively in right now. There's a few bills that I thought of might be interest of this group. There's AB 486, which creates a Division of Outdoor Recreation with the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. That had an amendment, and that is going to be recommended for approval through amendment. That will have a big cooperation with the Culture and Tourism Authority, and they'll be creating that much like they do in Colorado and some of those big outdoor recreation states. So we'll see how that ends up. We've been following that one closely. Also, SB 96, which creates a grant program to award grants of money to certain organizations, which include government organizations and nonprofits, to apply for federal funds to finance certain projects related to public lands. So what that does is it provides a funding source to serve as match, where groups might struggle or not have a match to be able to apply for federal funds related to anything related to public land. So it's a great opportunity to work with local nonprofits on projects that where match might be difficult. I know oftentimes we're very lucky because we do have a funding source, but oftentimes we're not able to come up with the entire match, and sometimes opportunities do pass us by. So that one has not been on the floor yet. And then also AB 84, which is basically a reauthorization of the state Question 1 legislation for parks, trails, and open space bonds. We've had a rural contingent from Washoe County, Churchill, Reno, Sparks, Douglas, Carson, and we're all working together with Nevada Land Trust and a few other groups to really actively be engaged with the conversations for this. We're hoping an amendment comes out soon. We've requested some call-outs for the north, one being for the Carson and Truckee Rivers, one for historic trails, and also the Lake Tahoe bike path. So we're really working to try to make sure that those desires move forward, which were very high priorities in the original SQ1 bond from the voters. So we're actively watching that and participating with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources on that. So I just wanted to give you kind of a little snapshot of the legislative session. There's a lot of other bills. There's some golf course bills. There's a lot of prevailing wage bills that if we have any construction projects would be of great concern, lowering the prevailing wage in the state of Nevada, which drives our construction costs up significantly. So we're really working with Public Works and monitoring those bills as well.
Thank you. Any questions of Jennifer? Any public comment? All right. Next item, 4C, activities, projects, and grants located on open space properties within the Carson River area. Ann?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad we, in a sense, we had a shorter meeting tonight because usually we fly through the updates. So tonight, if there's any interest in asking more questions, please feel free. But the updates do include our activities, and a lot is moving on. And as I mentioned earlier with Robin, we still have a very small staff, and it's amazing that we can juggle so much. The Buzzy's Ranch Conservation Plan, and there's a lot going on Buzzy's Ranch. The idea behind the conservation plan is whether we had water or not out there, and the water has been sold, or most of it has been sold. A conservation plan is the right management tool to manage ranches and grazing operations. We worked with the Natural Resources Conservation Service several years ago to write a conservation plan for Silver Saddle. We are right now working with Resource Concepts on this. And in this case, our water is leaving the land. And so that is part of the juggling act of, okay, when the water disappears, we won't have as much water as there was in the past. We will still have some, and we are working closely with Vidler Water Company to help us manage the water out there. But what areas of the ranch are going to go dry? Can we start now to start reclaiming some of those areas? Do we need to apply a different seed mix? And so working with RCI, they have invited the Agricultural Research Service out to the ranch to look at existing conditions and help to start developing alternative seed mixes. And so they were just out a few weeks ago as well. The Carson City Weed Coalition continues to do amazing things in Carson City as well. Marina Dispro is the weed coordinator. And in your packet is a sample of a pamphlet that she has developed for yellow star thistle. Very colorful, very informative. And it is the weed season. And this morning I had her out on Buzzy's Ranch. And unfortunately, we found more perennial pepperweed that we had not currently mapped either. So she enjoys going out to the field. Carson River Canyon Open Space. Lindsay Boyer did submit a grant to the Community Foundation of Western Nevada Dream Tags Charitable Fund. The grant request was originally a little more than $29,000, and we were providing $10,000 match. It was a 25% match on the grant, and the purpose behind this grant was the fire restoration from last year's rifle range fire, the big one that crossed over the ridgeline down into Carson River Canyon open space and down to the river. The quote for that project, $40,000, included aerial seeding. We have done some seeding by hand. There were some pictures previously of these little seed bombs that they threw out on the landscape, but it is a very hilly area that we simply cannot get to. And so trying to take as active as an approach as we can for revegetation. We have quotes for aerial seeding, as well as some chemical treatment around the rifle range, so we can try to prevent fires from beginning in the first place. So the grant is less, and then we're still trying to balance out what can we achieve with less funding. Yes.
Something occurred to me, and I don't know if it's feasible, but I wonder if some of the people who use the rifle range would like to help out as volunteers with some of that seating and such to help, move it as far as we possibly can with the awarded funding.
Great, yes. We can certainly ask. The next item is the Carson River Trail System Phase 2 Ranch Connections. This is our SNPLMA grant. Since we last met, the bids came in. We received 6. And Loomis and Associates was selected among a committee consisting of 5 members as the most qualified firm for the trail design and project management. And per previous request, their project schedule is also included in your packet. It is a very aggressive schedule with construction slated for next summer. And we're looking at a little more than 3 miles of trail. The first segment is the east side of the Prison Hill Recreation Area from the 5th Street Trailhead down to Silver Saddle Ranch, including a safe crossing on Carson River Road to connect with the Mexican Ditch Trail. Then at the entrance of Silver Saddle Ranch, there will be a new off-road, off the driving road trail to connect with the ranch houses, because right now people pretty much walk along the road. That's the only trail. So there will be a new trail. And then we are still looking at the options for a trail on Buzzy's Ranch connecting Carson River Park on the south to Riverview Park on the north. And it's amazing the various environmental challenges that we have in there. We have already started some wetland inventories, which we don't want to build trail in wetlands if we can help it, and reroute if necessary. Wildlife surveys, pastures, rivers. There's a lot to consider in such a small area. Are there any questions on that project? The next item are the various events throughout the city. So even though this is under the river category, we've just included all the events in one location. One of the neat ones that I'd like to point out is the third one on the list is the movie filming at the waterfall. There was a local movie production company, and they wanted to do some scenes out at the waterfall. So we worked with them and actually closed the trail down for one day so they could do their filming. And the movie is called Desert Shadows. I don't know when it will be out, but they do have a website, so you can take a look. It's a horror sci-fi flick. The next item, the Prison Hill Motorized Area Golden Eagles. We are working with the Nevada State Parks and Department of Wildlife to do ground surveys and observations on the Golden Eagles. So we will keep the committee apprised of updates. And then just the stewardship plan for it with the State Historic Preservation Office. Are there any questions on that report?
I would just add, Ann, that with regard to Buzzy's Ranch, we are in good shape this year for water rights. We do have water rights in place, and the permits were just issued for a new group of water rights that Vidler is moving down from the Carson Valley to the Buzzy's Ranch area, and that permit was issued either today or last week. So, and we do have permits in place from last year, which will go through the end of June for the entire ranch, and we have a pending application in for the balance of this year. So water rights on Buzzy's Ranch will be fine for this year. And there will be some water in place for next year because of the Vidler applications that have just been permitted, but they're not the full Buzzy's Ranch area. Mickey still owns the water rights on his ranch, and so they're part of this overall group. But the conservation plan should allow us to help make decisions as to the priority areas, and at the same time, we want to continue to see what we can do with regard to grant funding for the permanent water rights. But right now, it's temporary, but it's progressing, and we have another year to work with the current situation. And of course, we'll be working on that during the year. So hopefully we can stay out ahead of it, and water won't be a limiting factor, but one of the planning elements.
Thank you. And I did forget to add on to this report, but to bring another topic back to the committee was when Vidler was here to talk about water rights and the potential well site. They are drilling out there. They started on Friday, mobilization. By the end of this week, we will have the results of the soil and water to see if it's even feasible to have well sites out there.
Okay, anything else, Ann, on
That is all
on the
that
Carson
report.
River? Okay, any other comments from the committee? Public comments? Okay, let's move to other projects on open space properties.
Okay, the first item is the Ash Canyon Road. It is this time of year that we start getting phone calls from the fishermen wanting to know if they can reach Hobart Lake. With all the snow, I don't think we will be able to open the road by May 1st, so we will just keep a weekly eye on that and open it when conditions allow. But we know there's an interest. Bee City USA, working with the Chamber of Commerce leadership class, so you can see that they met their fundraising goal for a bee hotel, which will be built over by the new greenhouse by the Cancer Center and our new trail, also the Foothill Trail and the V&T. Fuel reduction with sheep began today. The sheep were unloaded behind Greenhouse Garden Center, and they will remain in town until about Memorial Day, is typically the timeline. I believe Lindsay said there were 700 ewes and 1,000 lambs. Kings Canyon Road, there's two projects. There's the trailhead area in which we are working with Public Works and their funding through the Federal Lands Access Program grant. Recently, we received the 30% design on the trailhead, and we have provided comments back to Public Works. And then there's the trailhead up to Horace Creek Ranch, the dirt road segment, in which we have been trying to work with the Forest Service for 2 years on repair. Their engineer finished the design drawings for the road. It is still in the cultural review process because it is the old Lincoln Highway, but the current estimate is over $100,000 for 2 miles of dirt road, which we will work with the Forest Service and partner on grant applications because this is not in their budget, nor is it a priority, at least statewide, if nationwide, because the Forest Service has identified their priority roads as those that allow passage for passenger vehicles. So if we, as Carson City, would like the road replaced, we need to help them find a way to do that. There are no updates on the Clear Creek acquisition and just various updates on our personnel, including the AmeriCorps members. Seasonal workers, we have hired one thus far, Miss Tammy Rossman. She was a previous Parks employee, so we kind of stole her, I suppose. But she is also a part-time employee at Greenhouse Garden Center, so she does enjoy the outdoors and the natural plants, and she's excited about this new opportunity to learn with us. The Natural Resource Management intern, interviews are scheduled at the end of this week. We are interviewing 3, and that is just a short-term position, about 3 months in the summer, intended for a college student. And then we hired a new gentleman, Mr. Ray Ralston, who is our new Silver Saddle Ranch caretaker. And he came to us by word of mouth from Ted. So another retired gentleman who's able to help us nearly every day of the week. One thing I would like to thank Friends of Silver Saddle Ranch, Nancy has left, but in the time that between Ted and Ray, we asked for volunteers to help us open and close the gate, and there were a couple volunteers with Friends of Silver Saddle that stepped up to help us do that. Are there any comments, questions?
Donna?
Yeah, I was going to ask, when are the AmeriCorps volunteers that we have, when are their terms up?
Their terms are different based on when they start, and the volunteer coordinator, I know her end date is in June, and the others are probably close behind, July or
So
August.
are we already starting to recruit to replace as they come due?
Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. So we need the board to approve next year's budget. We do have in the budget $23,000 annually to support AmeriCorps. The AmeriCorps costs have gone up, so we'll only be able to fund 2 people out of that instead of 3. So we need the board, I had asked for an additional increase for the board's consideration of $6,900, so we could get a third person, but we'll have to see if that moves forward at the board on Thursday. If it does, if we're successful, regardless, we'll have at least 2 people for next year at minimum. Probably the volunteer coordinator, and then the natural resources education kind of component as well. There's probably not 40 hours a week right now of PR and marketing because they've really cleaned up a lot. There's still a lot to do, but not as much as the other two categories.
Any other comments from committee? Public comments? Okay, next item.
Bruce, I do have.
I'm sorry, Jeremy?
Does anybody have any word on what has happened to our student member?
I don't think this is an appropriate time to discuss other members. Just if you are, we would
Fair
have
enough.
to notice it.
Question noted, thank you. Activities related to trail projects. Greg, you're looking different.
Mark your trails for June 1st, National Trails Day. We will celebrate this year out on the new Ham property acquisition, and we are changing things up a little bit. There will be trail construction, but in addition to trail construction, there will be an interpretive hike. And so we will gather everyone at the same time. We'll have the trail construction volunteers there, and we'll introduce them. And then when they take off marching up the hill to construct, then we'll have our interpretive people talk about trail design and what it means to walk the trails as they're designed and not cut the switchbacks, and why they are important in Carson City, and appreciate the wildlife and the scenic views and everything that we have associated with trails. The next item is an Adopt to Trail program. One of our AmeriCorps volunteers was very instrumental in helping to kick that off. And then our signage master plan has been implemented as well, and we will have signs placed along these trails where that have been adopted thus far. The Centennial Park Trails is updated there, various connections from Centennial up to Virginia City as well as Washoe Lake. The Upper Ham Loop, it relates also to National Trails Day on the 1st. The Prison Hill Recreation Area, the multiple projects happening there. The third one down, the Mexican Dam, Mexican Ditch Inlet Safe Passage. We did submit a grant this year requesting funding from the Carson Water Subconservancy District. In February, we received notice that the Finance Committee approved it, and then it goes up to the full board. And so if approved, what that will help with is a wider, safer passage for bicyclists and equestrians across the ditch intake. And then we had Eagle Scout project at Riverview Park. And while it is a park, our trails coordinator, because of his expertise in the trails, helped implement that project. Are there any questions, comments about the trails?
Great, thank you, and be sure and thank Greg. Okay, any public comments? All right, any board comments, committee comments on the trails? All right. Next item, any member announcements? Okay. Anything from staff?
No additional announcements, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Future agenda items. Okay, our next meeting will be I'm sorry, Margie, go ahead.
I had a comment for the future agenda items. I know we can't meet, we may not be able to do it in our June meeting, but what's happening with the naming on the cultural resources and that sort of thing?
It was just something that I was not able to complete in time for this meeting. So, yes, I have
Somewhere
it scheduled
it
in on
mentions
August,
August.
August 19th.
So it'll be at the following meeting. And we do have a joint meeting with Parks and Rec in June, so. It's on a different day. Yeah, it's the 17th, is it?
June 17th, third Monday still.
Third
on
Monday.
this
It's,
one.
okay, still the third Monday. Okay,
Same time, same place?
Yes, same time, same place.
any other
Different
future
seats.
agenda items?
Was that a future agenda items? Yes, Mr. Chair. I would like to take this opportunity at our joint meeting, Parks and Recreation, in which we will recognize our high school student. She could not be here this evening because she is touring colleges on the East Coast. She is graduating next month, and so in June, we will recognize her as her term in service with the committee. I hope that was appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Any public comments at this point? Okay, I would note that I will be at the Board of Supervisors on Thursday in support of our budget proposal and what we did tonight. For what it's worth, anybody, of course, else is welcome to join. If there's nothing else, last chance, we have a motion to adjourn.